This episode is sponsored by Angular Dev Summit, coming September 11th through the 18th, 2017. Hi, it's Chuck from devchat.tv. I reached out to some of my friends in the Angular community to put on a completely free, no-travel conference for Ruby developers. We have speakers like Rob Wermald, Jeff Welpley, and others coming to speak about all kinds of topics in Angular. So if you're trying to learn Angular or you're trying to level up Angular, come check it out. The talks are happening throughout the day each day, and we'll have a chat available during each session. Attending the talks is free, but you need to register. Go to angulardevsummit.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My JS Story. This week we're talking to Feross Aboukhadijeh. I think I said that close to right.
Yeah, that was basically right.
Now, you were on episode 155. We talked about Webtorrent.
Mm-hmm.
It was, 2 years ago? It was quite a while ago.
Yeah, tell me about it. I've been working on Webtorrent for a really long time. I was actually doing the math the other day, and it's like almost 10% of my life. Actually, more than 10% of my life at this point, because it's been almost 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a long time to be working on a single project.
No kidding. Well, we're going to dig into your story and kind of give people an idea of who you are and kind of how you got into this whole coding thing. To start out, why don't we just start there? How did you get into programming?
Yeah, I think it's actually hard for me to remember exactly when I got interested in programming specifically, but I've pretty much always been interested in computers and technology far back as I can remember. My mom told me a story about how when I was like a toddler, I was always watching people when they were using technology, like whether it was the television or the microwave or the VCR. And she said I like tried to imitate what I saw and actually put blocks into the VCR to pretend they were tapes and things like that. So, that every time they wanted to watch something on the TV, they would always have to pull a bunch of little blocks out of the VCR to actually put a tape in.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, but I think when I first started getting seriously interested was in middle school when I learned about HTML and wanted to make a personal site. It wasn't anything interesting. It was actually terrible, but that was when I first learned that you could do that you could actually create like websites. They weren't just things that you visited. They were actually things you could poke around with and play with. Yeah, that was a big revelation. And then in high school is actually then I think when I got more into, actually I don't even know if I wouldn't even call it programming. There was this really cool class actually offered by my high school. It was you could take it and it was basically like a tech team, so they called it. So we went around and fixed teachers' computers. We would like if there was a virus on them, they actually had us figure out how to fix the computer up because they were massively understaffed. So they just like had a team of about 4 of us go around and just try to keep the computers in the school working. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm actually surprised at how much freedom they gave us. I mean, it was like they just would say, yeah, something's wrong, go and fix it. And if they would send one of us out, and if we couldn't figure it out, then they'd send another one of us out. And then eventually they would actually have the one IT person who was responsible for like the entire district go and look at it if we couldn't fix it.
That's interesting. I don't know if I would have trusted some of my computer gifted friends with teachers' computers back in high school.
Yeah, and there was always the weirdest issues. Some of the computers had like administrator privileges turned on for like the student accounts as well, because some of the software that was required for certain classes needed it. So the drafting class that people were using AutoCAD, and so those computers had like always had viruses on them because people would install like first person shooters and play like during class time and download random games from the internet. Yeah, it was good times for sure.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, the other thing that was funny about it was that they actually had a school-wide filtering system so that students couldn't access certain sites, and one of the categories they blocked was like download sites. But in order to actually remove malware from the computers, we actually needed to download software from like download.com, I think is what we used. And so actually, in order to even do our jobs, we had to figure out how to use web proxies to get around the filters. So that was sort of I guess one way that I learned about, sort of behind the scenes of how stuff actually works, and ended up figuring out how to set up one of those on my own server, so that I was the cool kid in school and I could tell everybody, "Oh, you want to play games? Go to my my proxy site." And then I think I made the password something like, to get into it, you had to type like "Feross is awesome" or something.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great. Oh man. Yeah, anyway, and then let's see. I mean, that's probably I think that's probably that. Oh yeah, and then I guess the real programming is this is sort of computers. The real programming. My first experience was PHP in I think it was like maybe my junior year of high school. Around then, I bought a book at Barnes and Noble about PHP and MySQL, and was playing around with that. And I wanted to build a site to host my favorite Flash animations. Remember those before YouTube? Yeah, so that was like my project, was like, let's figure out how to build a database-driven website where people can submit their Flash animations and soundboards and prank phone calls and all that kind of like internet humor stuff. And the site was called Free the Flash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was my real first website that I built.
Oh wow!
It's actually still online, but I'm kind of embarrassed about it. Yeah, it's full of really childish humor and silly things, but it's still up.
Nice. So how do you get from there to JavaScript?
I'm trying to think. Like I was never really good at JavaScript. I think JavaScript is one of those languages that you don't actually really bother to sit down and learn. At least it used to be that way. People would just sort of be like, "Oh, yeah, I can program. Oh, I can figure out JavaScript." And there weren't that many really good resources. At least I didn't know of any. So it's sort of something I've always just sort of muddled through and copy pasted code and stuff like that. So I didn't really know JavaScript for quite a bit of my early programming career. And it was only when I started a company when I was in college, or actually right after I graduated from college, when I basically like sort of started taking JavaScript really seriously because I was learning Node.js. And that's sort of when I realized, wow, okay, this is a real programming language, and you can build real things with it. And then obviously my JavaScript skills were transferable to the front end as well. The startup was called PureCDN, and we were trying to make a content delivery network that would work in the browser using WebRTC. So I think I might have talked about that a little bit in the other podcast that we did.
Yep. Yeah, I think you did go into that some.
Yeah, basically the idea was you would add a script tag to your website, and then we would try to find other people on your site who are visiting your site at the same time, who already have the content that you want, and then you would fetch it from them over a peer-to-peer connection to save the to save on your hosting bill, basically to reduce your CDN bill. But yeah, so that was like a pretty big Node application, and there was also a pretty intense front end component. And so that's when I started learning about like NPM and the Node way, how you build things with service microservices and how do you deploy a JavaScript application, and this crazy ecosystem of NPM and all this kind of stuff. That was when I first got exposed to it. So that was in 2013.
Nice. Yeah. So, we kind of talked a little bit, I guess, about the origin of Webtorrent. Is that still mostly what you're working on in JavaScript?
I've been trying to transition Webtorrent to more of a distributed contribution model, so that it's always been something that I've given out the commit rights to freely. If someone makes a really good contribution, I'll just add them to the GitHub for it. But that's always been kind of informal, and the project is split across dozens of repositories and npm packages. So it's sort of been kind of inconsistent. I might add somebody to one repo but not to another, and so anyway. I recently made it into an organization on GitHub, and I'm hoping to make it something that's not just completely dependent upon me in order for it to continue existing. I'm going to be involved with it for the foreseeable future. I mean, I think Webtorrent is still really fun to work on, but I'm also trying to, do new projects as well besides just that. So there's a team of people who are all contributing to Webtorrent who all have commit rights, and I want the project to be in a healthy state. But the good news is, I think Webtorrent is sort of mostly done in some sense. I mean, it works, right? It works well. There's obviously bugs and things that could always be better, like with any software. But if you use Webtorrent, you know that it works. And especially if you use the desktop application to torrent things, it's really polished and works pretty nicely. So I feel good about the state of it.
Nice. Are there other contributions you've made to the JavaScript community that you are proud of and want to talk about?
Yeah, I would say probably the one that I'm most known for is standard JS, or sometimes it's called JavaScript standard style, which, that name always gets people's blood flowing and gets them riled up. But standard JS is basically a attempt to codify some common sense JavaScript style rules into a simple package that you can install. So if you want to enforce a same set of code style requirements on your code base, you can just npm install standard, and then in your test field, in package.json, you can just add standard. And so you run one command, standard, and it'll just tell you whether your code is standard or not. And if it's not, it will tell you exactly, what errors there are on which lines in your project. And these are errors, of all kinds, like things about consistent styling. So things like, spacing things correctly, and things like that are sort of mostly preferences that people have. But there's also things that are that it catches that are errors or potential errors in your code. So things like forgetting to handle an error in a node style callback, or something that's almost certainly a programmer error, like missing, using a variable before it's defined and things like that. So rather than having to spend a long time debating a bunch of ESLint rules with your team and deciding exactly which of hundreds of rules you want to enforce and what exactly to configure them to, you can start with standard as sort of a sane starting point. So it's been pretty popular. I think around 800,000 people download it every month on NPM. So it's, I think currently like the second most popular style guide after the Airbnb style guide. So it's been fun to work on that, because just sort of the community is really good, and it's always good fun to sort of troll people a little bit with the name.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know if you know the story of how it got started at the very beginning of standard. I should probably share that. I think
go ahead.
Yeah, basically, so I was working on, on Webtorrent, and I kept giving this, repeated feedback on pull requests from people. I kept getting pull requests that were really good, that, contained features or bug fixes that I wanted to merge. But the problem was that there would always be minor, style issues. Somebody would, not match the existing style of the file that they were editing. They would, inconsistencies that didn't really matter to the functionality of the application, but or of the module, but that if you let these kinds of small things accumulate in your code base over time, you end up with a situation where it's hard to scan files quickly, because every time a function is declared, it looks slightly differently. Sometimes it's assigned to a variable, and sometimes it's a function declaration, or sometimes it's that the indentation is wrong and completely off, and it's just these small things like slow you down in tiny ways. But over time, if you let that sloppiness into your code base, it's very easy for it to spiral out of control. So it's best to keep it always. In my experience, it's best to just keep things nice, and don't even let the first bad code into the code base in the first place, sort of like the broken Windows theory, where if there's a neighborhood with a broken window, people start to think that things aren't maintained and things aren't taken care of, and then things start to degrade quickly after that. So what I ended up having to do was I had this tough decision. I can either merge the pull requests and then go in myself and fix the issue, or I could give them feedback and leave a comment and say, this is great. I want to merge this, but please, fix these 2 or 3 issues and update your pull request. And when you do that, around half the time, people just disappear and they'd never actually make the change. And so then you have this like abandoned pull request that you have to remember to go back and basically just merge yourself. Or sometimes people want to actually fix it up, but they don't know how to update a pull request. It's something that it's not easy to do, and it's also honestly it's not something that it's really not really nice to do to a contributor, especially a first-time contributor to your project, because they went out of their way to actually make a good change, and then you're like giving them more work to do, and making it harder for that change to get in. So it's just like an extra barrier that you're putting up. So anyway, the idea was let's just throw in a linter here that can catch these issues that people, so that at least if people are running npm tests to make sure that their code changes are actually working, the test suite, then at least they'll catch the issues before they send in a pull request. And so I added an ESLint configuration, which is something I'm sure a lot of people have done. It's not that's a common sense way to solve this problem. But the issue was that there are dozens of Webtorrent repos. That causes basically the ESLint files to have to be copied into 10 or 20 different repositories. And then as like new ESLint rules come out that I want to add to the configuration, I have to then add that new rule to all 20 configurations, right? And so keeping the ESLint files in sync just became like a burden. And so there was an easy solution to this, which was to just take the ESLint file and put it into a package, an npm package that all of the different projects could just depend upon. And so that's sort of how the idea for standard came about. It was like, let's just put the config in one place and then it'll be easy to keep it updated. But then to make it easier to use, rather than having every project depend on ESLint and every project would then have a different ESLint version, I also put ESLint into the package and exposed a single command that you could just run that would run ESLint with that config. And so when it came time to pick a name for it, I was going to call it Webtorrent style or Feross style or something like that, or for Webtorrent linter, because it was just supposed to be for the Webtorrent project. But I had just written a package that lets you search the search npm for available names using a dictionary, and so I just ran that, and it came up with a bunch of possible dictionary words that I could use for the package, and one of them was standard, and another one was policy, I think, that I was considering. And I was just like, oh man, this would be so good if I pick policy, then it's kind of like, okay, so this is a policy that you can enforce on your code. But standard has this other connotation of it being a standard, which I thought was really funny, since a lot of the style decisions are purely my preference. So yeah, I just picked that name thinking it would be a kind of a little funny joke, but some people felt strongly about it, and there was some debates on Twitter and some exchanges.
I love the internet.
How dare you call this a standard? Who are you? Are you part of the ECMA standards body? Are you on TC39? Where's the standards organization? Yeah. And so yeah.
If you're one of the people that had a problem with that, I'm sorry for laughing, but
no, I take the point. I mean, there is a chance people would be confused and think that it's a real standard, but we try to be clear in the README about it, and there's no like intentional misleading. It's just more of a joke that the name is called standard. But to be fair though, like one of the like unintentional benefits of standard was, I made it so that I wouldn't have to repeat the ESLint configs across projects. But this unintentional benefit was that people started saying, well, you know what? Actually, there is a benefit to me just writing code the same way as this standard tool wants me to. Then I don't have to convince my team to adopt ESLint, and we don't have to debate every point, and we don't have to have style disagreements about, are we going to all decide to use double quotes or single quotes for our strings, right? Like, it doesn't really matter as long as you're consistent. Consistency is the most important thing. And so it's sort of nice now when you go to a project on GitHub and you see that the project uses standard, then you know exactly what code you need to write and what to expect. It's just makes things uniform in a nice way. So that was an unexpected benefit.
Very cool. So what are you working on now?
Well, I made a website recently just for fun that might be cool to talk about. It's called Play. It's a music site. You can visit it. The URL is play.cash, CASH, so play.cash. And it's a way to listen to music and watch the music videos that go with the songs. So it has a really quick search that lets you quickly get to the song you're looking for. And it uses YouTube to actually play the videos. But what's really cool about it is it has integration with this service called Song Facts. So if the song that you're listening to has associated facts in this Song Facts database, then those facts will show up while you watch the video. So in the form of little bubbles that will appear on top of the video, like VH1 pop-up video, which is a really cool little TV program on the VH1 channel in the early 2000s that basically show you little bubbles of like behind the scenes information about how the song was made, what the artist might have meant with the song, some meanings of the lyrics, and also really interesting info about like who wrote the song or how the collaboration happened to make certain songs. Just sort of everything that a music lover would really want to know about different songs. I find it really interesting to go through and just like look at the different facts for my favorite bands. So it was mostly an experiment for me to learn about Preact.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to try that out. Are you familiar with Preact?
I've heard of it, but I haven't actually looked into it.
Yeah, so it's basically it's API compatible with React, which means that your code, your React components and everything should just work if you switch from React to Preact or back to React. So so why would you use Preact? Well, it's about a tenth the size of React. So React is around 30 kilobytes, I believe, and Preact is 3 kilobytes. Which is pretty nice if you're trying to make a site that works well on mobile. And so it was mainly a way for me I wanted to experiment with how small can I make this JavaScript bundle? How efficiently can I make a full featured site with lots of fanciness, but all while keeping the JavaScript bundle really small. So I was able to basically keep the bundle at 25 kilobytes. I thought that was an interesting experiment I wanted to try. I think it's pretty incredible that an entire site can be, built with less kilobytes than, just including React would add to your application. So it's definitely possible to build applications that don't have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilobytes of JavaScript. And that's something that actually a lot of people have forgotten, in my opinion. You go to like a news site and you'll get like megs of JavaScript, just to show text.
Yeah.
So, it's sort of like unbelievable in some ways. But I don't know. I think it's a fun little app. I spent about a couple months building it, and I don't know if I'm going to keep working on it. I'm thinking that I'm probably going to try and move on to another project now. But I'm glad I was able to build that. It's a fun little site, so check it out.
Sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, the last section of this show is picks. Have you ever felt like you're falling behind, or that the programming world is moving so fast that it's impossible to keep up? Then there's the issue of where to go to make sure you're up to date. The answer is to join a community dedicated to discussing the latest in JavaScript. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you got JavaScript jabber all day? Well, you can, kind of. We've created a Slack community for JavaScript jabber. That means that you can connect with our listeners and guests on a platform you're most likely already using. Plus, we've set up a Keeping Current channel that pulls stories from across the web to help you know what people are talking about. And coming soon, we'll be holding monthly webinars and roundtable video chats to connect with experts in the community and with each other. So come join us at javascriptjabber.com/Slack. Do you have some things you want to shout out about on the show?
Yeah, I'll shout out the decentralized web. So there's a whole bunch of different teams trying to work on making the web a less, well, actually, let me phrase that positively, a more free place and a more open place, and a place where, our online experiences aren't controlled by a handful of super powerful corporations. So I wanted to shout out a whole bunch of those efforts. And if you're interested in this at all, you should just go to your browser right now and open a tab for each one of these. So check out the DAT project, the Beaker project, the IPFS project, Secure Scuttlebutt, Patchwork, and Brave.
Cool.
All are doing really cool things.
Nice. Can I get links to those in the Skype chat so I can put them in the show notes?
Sure thing. Yeah, I'll do that.
All right. Well, in the vein of what you're picking, I'm going to pick a few things. I don't know if these help decentralize things, but I like them. One of them is Let's Encrypt.
Nice.
I use them for all of my certificates. It's funny because I actually have a wildcard cert that probably has like 3 years left on it on devchat.tv, and I just switched over to Let's Encrypt because it was easier.
Yeah, I just switched over all my stuff as well. It's the only hard part about Let's Encrypt is that cron job you need to set up to keep the certificates up to date.
Yeah.
But yeah. How did you find that? Was that hard to figure out?
I basically just copied and pasted whatever it was on the article that I used. I think it was on DigitalOcean.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, yeah, just put this in your cron tab. Okay. I kind of looked at it to make sure it wasn't scary, but I kind of trust those guys anyway. And then I was like, it was mostly checking it just because I used to be a systems administrator and I just don't put stuff on my server. But yeah, I was pretty happy with that. It was really relatively simple to get set up. I did mess it up a few times and had to wait the cooldown period. It was an hour or something, I don't remember. But yeah, so I really like that. And yeah, for hosting, I use DigitalOcean, like I mentioned, and they're pretty awesome. I really like their interface, and things just work out really well that way. So,
yeah, I found Let's Encrypt's documentation was mostly good, but I think I ran into some issues when I was setting it up where my version of Ubuntu had an older version of the Let's Encrypt CLI, so I had to do some extra Googling to figure out how to accomplish. I can't remember what it was, but after I had it set up, yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, you run one command and you have a cert. So yeah, it's a great service. I love it.
Well, and it's a cert that the browsers will accept, as opposed to like the self-signed certs. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, if people want to check on what you're doing now, see what's going on maybe with Webtorrent or something else, where should they go?
Well, you can find the Webtorrent Twitter account. It's Webtorrent app. And you can also just follow me if you want. I'm Feross on Twitter.
All right.
Feross.
Yep. All right, Feross. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And we will be back next week with another story. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.